Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey My Mother's Son podcast. I'm joined with one of my former interns, a former player in the old Berkshire baseball organization, Fred Ghilino. Fred, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dan. Good to see you.
Absolutely. This has been like the podcast in the making for like over a year and a half. We
Yeah,
we originally started talking about this, back when we were visiting with you in October of 2022,
yeah, right
and
after the
just
pandemic.
yeah, and
Yeah,
hey, life gets in the way, and you're traveling all over, we're traveling all over, and we
yeah,
finally we finally got it nailed down. But
yeah,
so I've been looking forward to this for a while. But before we get started with the conversation, just introduce yourself in your own words. Who is Fred Ghilino today?
yeah. So, Dan, thank you again. Good talking with you. Nice catching up. So Fred Ghilino today is a account manager for an advertising agency out here in New Jersey. Uh, Probably the most important thing that I am is a father to two little girls here, Ellie, who's 5, and Lulu, who's 3. Um, and a husband to my amazing wife, Krista. We live in northern New Jersey, and I'm just kind of trying to follow Dan's footsteps, actually, and those are some big footsteps to fill, as I'm sure everybody has followed Dan's journey. But from volunteering at the local Roxbury Soccer Club here, and doing things for the community that I learned a lot from Dan. I've really tried to, give back and be a positive person, and kind of well-rounded person for not only my family, but for the community here.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
So, Freddie, I mean, you and I met, as I mentioned in the intro. You were one of my interns
Yeah.
for Berkshire baseball back
How long ago
when,
was that, Dan?
and it was a long time
Fif-
ago. Um,
15, what?
so
Yeah, 15.
2008
Yeah,
is when you did that internship.
crazy.
We were Organization was still actually working out of my house.
Yeah,
Um, you found out about the opportunity through a mutual friend,
yep, yeah.
and I interviewed you. Other than the fact that you're a Yankees fan, I loved everything about you. But
Yeah, I'm
um,
surprised you let me in the house with the Yankee gear, Dan.
but tell me a little bit about just like that, your first um, you know, impression, so to speak.
Yeah,
You're literally, driving from Kutztown University,
yep.
probably a good 45 minute to an hour drive to where we were, literally
Yeah,
like in the middle of nowhere.
some windy roads in a strange house. Yeah, and it's funny because you think back, and I kind of think back to myself as that kid, really, you think you're an adult at that age, but what, you're 19, 20 years old, you're just a kid, right? You're just trying to find your way. So I think one of the things that I always, and my father always told me this, is get experience, right? Get experience wherever you can, and you never know what you're gonna like or what you're gonna get into. So, one of the things that I always try to do is, find roles or positions or jobs or opportunities. And since one of our, Lauren, one of my good friends, had mentioned that she was interning with you, I decided to give it a whirl and go out there and meet with you. And first walking in, the dogs barking and, and knocking on the door. I was like, what's going on? I thought this was a baseball, kind of internship. I was expecting to kind of walk into some, a field house or something. But once I got in there, and you took me down, and we had that conversation down in the basement, which, by the way, was like a mini Fenway with like the whole outfield and everything kind of set up like that. I was like, oh, this is cool. And we had a quick conversation, and it was just kind of from the beginning. I knew that you were somebody that I'd like to aspire to be, and just those conversations early on really were, got me excited to join the organization. And then I think we just kind of hit it off from there and hit the ground running. And it was some of the best times and best memories that I've had, working, as you could say, working. But it was a lot of fun. And looking back, I'm glad that I took that leap, right? I didn't I didn't not knock that door. And after that ride, I could have just turned around and said, this isn't for me, or whatnot. But I'm glad that I stuck it out. And I think, that's part of life, right? It's like you got to show up, right? You got to show up. And even if it's hard, and me and you are moving, field sand at 2 a.m. and doing all these crazy things, or getting up at real early for a college kid at 5 a.m. to go run a baseball tournament on a Saturday, you show up, right? And you're gonna make mistakes and things, and you're gonna do things maybe not the right way. Or I remember there was one thing you were telling me, like, there's standards and procedures or something, and you were like, this is how we do things, and this is how we put on names on the back of a shirt, right? And I remember I misspelled a name one time, and I was like freaking out, Dan. I don't know if you remember this, but I remember it vividly. And I had like one of the teams, like, misspelled, and I was like, oh, Dan's gonna fire me, he's gonna kill me. I was kind of freaking out. And then, I remember I told you, and you're like, come on, just don't do it again. Like, just make sure you're proofing it. And then I'm like, all right, I learned from that. And even like I do that now today. Like I double check and triple check my emails, or my proposals to my clients and everything. So I think all those little things that you pick up and you learn like along the way, they matter, right? And the best way I feel like of learning is by doing, right? You could go into the classroom and you learn, and you figure out some things, but getting yourself out there and having internships and meeting with people and building those relationships like we were talking about earlier, that all matters.
Yeah, definitely does. Was there any point on that drive that, had you not known Lauren and she hadn't, recommended the position to you,
Oh
where
yeah,
you
I was
you would
turning
have thought,
around.
like, where am I going, man? Like,
Yeah.
is there,
Well,
when are you
it's funny
dueling
because it's like,
banjos around the corner or
yeah,
what?
well, so listen, I grew up in New Jersey, but like where I grew up, it's Warren County, New Jersey, which is like we had more cows than people out there. So I was used to farmland. So it didn't scare me, but it did cross my mind, like, where am I going out here? Like, where's this going to end up? Yeah, you're for sure, for sure.
It's so funny. But yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things that I always enjoyed, um, you know, when we first, kind of started our intern program, so to speak, because you were one of the first, you and Lauren and Dan Riley were,
Yeah, I think I
some
was
of
like
the,
number 3 or 4,
yeah.
or like,
Um, and there was, prior to that, as a coach, there are always lessons to teach the players on the field and stuff. And then, it was a different role for me to work, one on one and kind of hand in hand with a younger person at that point. So it was very similar to coaching,
yeah.
but just in a different atmosphere. And
Correct. It was more of a business coach, right? It was more of a, life coach in some ways, like, right? Like, it's not so much about the baseball part of it, right? It's more about, how you approach your day. How do you approach challenges? How do you solve things? Like, all of those things that I think that were kind of, invaluable to a young person, and very, like I said, when you're that age, you think you're, you're an adult, but you're not, right? You're just a moldable kid. So, I always appreciated all of the teaching and the conversations, and the mentorship that you kind of provided for me. And I told you this too when you were here visiting, is like, I kind of looked at you as a second dad, away from my family at, back here in New Jersey. I kind of just looked up to you in that light, and that's important for, an impressionable 19 or 20-year-old kid. So
yeah,
I can't thank you enough for all those lessons and everything. So
you're trying to make me cry here.
I'm not trying to. I'm not. I'm just, I'm giving you the love that you showed me back, that, all those years ago. So
No, and honestly, to hear that is very, rewarding, and I'm very appreciative of that, because, again, it's not, I don't know of how many other, you know, kids who went through an internship would say that about that internship, and I'm
yeah,
sure there's some. I would hope that they all did, but I know that's not the case. A
of
lot of
course
times
not.
it's just kind of cranking out numbers. I mean, you did some other internships as well.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
it's you get what you put in. And I think that standard from your point of view with me, and from my point of view with you, right? So like, you know, all the things, the time, I thought, even looking back at it, like I felt like you could rely on me. Like if you needed something done, or if you were like, hey, I need this done, you would call me up and I would be there, and you could, we would get it done, right? So I felt that mutually, like I didn't want to disappoint you and I wanted to come through for you. And I think that just builds that trust in that relationship. And then that kind of takes it to that next level, right? I interned at various other different places, and you were just kind of like there to push papers around and, do whatever they, needed you to do, but there was no real true investment in them. So I think that's where a lot of those internships fall short is, the company or the organization doesn't invest the time back into that young person.
Right.
Right. And I think if that happened, the young person might invest back into the company and the organization. And then that's where you see these beautiful things, these stories that we're talking about that that's where they grow. So
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
yeah,
And you kind of took a different route. A lot of our interns were either just interns. Then we had some former players who came back in their college years and became interns. And then
yep,
you were an intern first, but then actually came back and played in the
played,
organization for a little bit
yeah,
as well.
yep,
Um, but during the internship, because you had a sports background, you played
yeah,
baseball, you played football, you did all that stuff growing up.
hmm,
Um, you know, played in some tournaments as a kid and stuff like
yeah,
that
yeah.
until you started, you know, helping us organize tournaments and that sort of stuff. Did you really understand what went into putting a tournament on when you were a
Oh,
player as a kid?
no
And
way.
what type of how
Yeah,
did that change your appreciation for going
it's
out
it's
and
it's
playing?
eye opening. And it's eye opening. And before and I had a little brief, and I don't know if you know this, but I had a little bit of a preview at this because a couple years before I started interning with you, I came home after high school and I volunteered as a umpire, right? For third, fourth, fifth grade boys baseball. And you know, getting there and lining the field and like getting the field ready and then doing 3 or 4 games, you're beat as an umpire, right? And then you're dealing with the parents who everyone knows that's a whole different level now of people balls and strikes. And I'm sorry, your kid can't get it across the plate, anything close, I'm calling a strike because we'll be here until 7 o'clock at night kind of thing. But I had an appreciation a little bit of like what it takes to just be part of the game as a player all the way through high school. No, like kind of blind to it, right? Because you're there, you show up, your parents drop you off, right? And you go play and then you leave and you don't really think about the umpires or the field managers or the people that are working the concessions or having the appreciation for all that goes into that youth sports, right? But I can say without a doubt that even to this day when I go and do something around town, I'm like looking at the field and even I play softball. We play in a kind of a over 30 league out here, and we're doing the field, and it's something that you kind of have an appreciation for, and I think baseball more than other sports allows you to do that hard work to prep the field, right? Because you're involved with it. You're raking the field. You're lining. Sometimes you're chalking. You're putting the box in. And more than other sports, I feel like it has that kind of maintenance or like that hard work that you have to put in to be able to play on it, right? Or play on it well, or good enough where you're not getting crazy hops, or it's something that's playable. So I got a tremendous appreciation for that. Moving pallets of field dry with you and, lining the field and you teaching me how to like actually line a box, the right way. And all of that stuff still sticks with me. It's the hard work, right? It's the hard work that goes into it before you play, right?
Yeah.
And as an adult and when I have like my daughters, I'm involved with the youth soccer here in town, and you know, I try to get them to understand that, I want them to understand that what goes into making sure the field's lined and that all the stuff, and have them have a little bit of a different appreciation than I had when I was at that age. So it was eye opening and something that I think about, still to this day about all that, the hard work that we're talking about, but a lot of fun that we had too,
Yeah.
right? A lot of laughs and I think when you're laughing and you're having fun and you're joking, the hard work isn't so
Right.
bad.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a huge difference. I mean, if you're out there again at midnight trying to move a pallet a field dry and you're getting wet, but you're joking with each other and laughing about it, it makes all that other stuff. And I just think that's the way you need to approach life with any task, is to be able to, also make it fun regardless
To this day,
how hard
Dan,
it is,
I bet if if I brought you to my office and, you saw some of my colleagues, they would say, I'm the one that's making everybody joke or laugh, or if, something's hard, we have a deadline or we have something, I'm trying to keep it light because at the end of the day, I feel like people, if they can relate to you and they could joke with you and they could smile, they're open. Their defenses aren't down. Their mind's not in a defensive standpoint. And when you have that positive approach and that positive mindset, that's where all the good thoughts come out of, right? That's where those, hey, let's get it done. Let's take care of it. Let's do the right thing for the client, do the right thing as a parent, just, everything that you approach in life, when you approach it positive with a can-do attitude, I feel like it's going to be a success and you'll be able to move forward. I mean, listen, life's not always roses and rainbows, but you got to be able to find the good in even some of the worst situations. And I think
absolutely.
that's something as you grow older and you live through life, nobody comes out unscathed with stuff. So
Right.
you have to learn how to, process that and learn from it. You're going to make mistakes like we talked about. Even as an intern, you're going to make mistakes, but don't make the same mistake twice, right?
Right.
Learn from it.
Yep.
Learn from
Learn from it, move on, and don't
it and
do it
grow.
again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, again, just to kind of paint a picture for the listeners, this was a time when the organization was, not at a big facility. It was out of my house. I did have an
Mhm.
office within the house. The basement was kind of the supply room for the
Mhm.
organization, the unfinished side of our basement. Um, you're there with at that time 4 dogs as your colleagues as well. Um, so to kind of turn that into a professional atmosphere, I think we did a pretty good job at being able to do that. Um,
Oh, yeah.
but then there was also the component of, um, you know, I think a lot of times Sandy and I kind of, would adopt you guys as interns, because
It was.
you're
We
eating
were just
lunch
a
there,
Yeah, you're
we're
there for 7-8 hours and you're eating lunch and you're doing t-shirts, you're talking about planning out, the different teams coming in, you're talking about taking trips to Costco and Sam's Club and loading up the truck and moving out, all sorts of stuff, we're just literally we're spending, besides like, my roommates, it's probably for about a year of my life, I probably spent the most time with you and Sandy
yeah,
and the rest of the crew there, which like I said, I still have so many fond memories of just those times and like I said, the fun and the hard work and I was proud to go back. One of a proud thing of a moment for me was when you invited me back to speak as a guest speaker at the banquet, right? And this was only 3 or 4 years after I was an intern and you
yeah,
were, in your basement. And in that short span of time, you had grown, you've, secured a huge facility, right? You now have, it's turned to a whole different level. You had like full-time employees working there. It just kind of like went from, like you said, your basement kind of thing to like now the next level, right? And when you invited me back, that was something that I was really proud to see. And I think again, a testament to all the years and the hard work that you put in, and then just the right people in the organization and all the hard work that everyone really put in, was able to make that kind of turn to the next level, right? And that was something that I was really proud to be a part of, and it's still to this day I'm proud to say I was part of the Berkshire the crew out there.
yeah, yeah. Well, we were definitely honored to have you come back and speak to our kids as well. So, what are some of the things that, you know, from that time with the organization you've been able to carry, and you talked a little bit about it, but, you
Yeah,
know, some of the things that you've been able to carry over into your professional life specifically now?
yeah, yeah. So I think number one is like relationships, right? Relationships matter. Um, I'm obviously in a position where I'm dealing with clients, I'm clients facing, I'm dealing with potential new clients, I'm dealing with clients that we currently have, and I'm working with in groups and internal groups out, external groups and it gets tricky sometimes, but at the end of the day, if somebody respects you and they like who you are as a person, truly, all of that other stuff kind of falls away, right? And they can trust you, and they can look for you for advice, and they can consult with you. And a lot of the times I try to value that as a person, is building true relationships. And I think that goes back to that time of, learning from you and how you did business and approached, everyone around in the organization, parents, right? It's a lot of kind of a similar role, right? You're dealing with parents, you're dealing with coaches, you're dealing with vendors, you're dealing with teams from all over the East Coast, right? And you're trying to put on this product, and I feel like, people respected you, Dan, and they looked up to you, and you always told it like it was, right? And I think that I try to, roll that out into my daily life. And like I said, I think it's very important to have those relationships with people, not only just as a business standpoint, but on a personal level, where you know who they are and they know who you are, right? So I think that's important. We talked about humor and laughter. I think we talked a little bit about that, about how important that is to, like, kind of a daily basis of bringing that to your life and being positive. Like I said, life isn't always positive, but if you could find positive things in those tough moments that you have to go through and build on them, you're gonna be okay, and you're gonna push through, and you're gonna be okay. So if you could smile or make people laugh, or tell a joke when you don't want to, or lend a helping hand, to somebody, that makes a difference. And I think that's something that I kind of, you know try to, do on a daily basis. We talked about hard work, right? About, putting in the hard work. And I think that, not to say that, looking back at that time, what was hard work back then, right? For a 19 or 20-year-old kid. But hard work is good for you. It's okay to do hard things, right? It's okay to be uncomfortable, because that's how we grow as people. So, like we were talking about driving out to the to those hills, and second guessing things and whatnot. I'm just glad that I, stayed the track, and I was rewarded with 10 times fold whatever I could, think about, going into that. So those are all, some things that I could think of top of mind that I really try to carry on in my, day-to-day activities. Like I said, not only as a someone in the professional field, but at home and as a dad, and hopefully something I can, teach my kids with, how to live. So
Yeah, and I think, you hit the nail on the head when it comes to relationships, because, it doesn't matter if you have the best product on the market, if people don't like you, they're not going to buy from you. People buy from
100%.
people,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that, when I was still in sales, I learned, very quick, is that people buy from people,
Yeah.
and they've got to like you, and you got to form a relationship. It's not just a transaction. I mean, I know there are people out there who approach it just, as a transactional relationship,
Yeah.
and, they've got probably some short-term success. But I think long-term success is where they lack in. And even,
100%.
I think back to my days, with Wix Lumber. I mean, I still have, customers today who haven't sold, a door, a window, or a lumber package or a truss to in,
Yeah. In
20
what
years.
decades? Yeah.
But if I see him, when we're back in Pennsylvania, if I see him, at a store or something, we're stopping and we're talking for 20 minutes,
Yeah.
and it's
100%.
just because it wasn't about the business. It was about the
The
relationship,
relationship and the person, and it's so, I, I think it's the most important thing, honestly. And I think nowadays it's harder for people to connect, and I don't know if that's technology or people just not being able to have these type of conversations, like, even, from political to, sports to, we can never seem to have conversations anymore. There's no, you can't, you have to be right or wrong, or whatnot. So I mean, for me, personally, I think, those relationships that you build are just tremendous, and they're lifelong, like you said. Like, you know Every time I go back out to Kutztown and I stop by all my old Coca-Cola routes, some of the places we used to go eat lunch out there in Reading and why I'm missing and all that stuff. I stop by and they go, "Hey Fred, what's going on?" They still give me a little espresso at all those Italian places. It's like, it matters. And, some of those things that you go through and you live through, and it's the banter, it's the jokes, it's the, how's your family, how your family doing. I think, that stuff matters to people. And, I really try to live my life with that relationship first, over a lot of things, as I go throughout my day.
So let's talk a little bit about parenthood.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
You mean gray beard? Look, you see the gray beard hairs. So
one of the things I learned from you right out of the gate, early on into our, internship, was that you were a person who came from very strong family values.
mhm.
Even when, you mentioned that you'd spoken at our banquet after your internship a few years later, you brought a whole clan of family
Yeah.
members
Yep.
along with you.
Yep.
And
Hmm.
family was always, very important to you. Something I learned from you right out of the gate, that your
Hmm.
family was very important, that you learned a lot of lessons from your mom and dad and
Yeah.
siblings and all that sort of stuff. So going into parenthood, and nothing prepares you for parenthood,
There's
nothing,
books,
nothing
Dan.
at all.
There's conversations. Throw it all out the window. It's don't spend your money on it. Just roll up your sleeves. You know, take you get as much sleep as you can, because that's the one thing that you cannot prepare for, is to not sleep for a couple of years. Um, but it's one of those things that the hardest. It's very hard. It's very hard. I think people underestimate how hard it is to raise kids, but it's the most rewarding thing. And I think that, again, kind of looking back at our conversation, is kind of that balance, right, between difficult and amazing, right, and adversity and joy. Like, I think there is a balance to life, and you have to go through those crazy hard times of not sleeping. But when your daughter looks up with you and says, "Dad, you're the best dad in the world and I love you," it's like your whole world changes, right? So it's difficult, but it's amazing. And I think, if you're a parent out there, you could relate to that. And it's something that, out of anything in my life, that I'm most proud of is being a father, and something that I always really wanted to be since I was a kid. It's silly to say, is I always wanted to be a dad, and I'm really blessed that I am a father to two amazing little girls, and they're my whole world. So, and family, Dan, you hit it off the beginning. Family is so important. And there's the family you're born into, and then there's the family you choose as you go through life. And I'm lucky to have an amazing family that I was born into, and I'm lucky too to have an amazing family that I that I have grown over these 36 years of my life, including yourself and Sandy, and many of the Berkshire guys. But I have four best friends that, from kindergarten, we've been the closest, and we still get together now, and our kids all are the same age. And it's an amazing thing to be a part of, where you have respect and love, um, across the board, and support, from not only your family you're born into, but the people that you choose to be part of your life, and be there for. So,
Yeah. Was there anything specific that you learned from your parents that have helped you throughout your parenthood journey?
anything specific? Patience. To have patience, and it's difficult to have.
Yeah.
When you work so hard every day, and you're tired, and you get home, and the kids are running around, they're throwing everything around the playroom, and they're just being little 5 and 3 year olds. As much as you want to be like, "Oh, I want it to be perfect, and I want it to be this." Remember, we talked about, nothing's perfect, right? So get that kind of mindset out of your mind, and take a deep breath, and have patience. And and relax a little bit. Life's crazy enough and hard enough. And they're at a wonderful age, right? They're 5 and 3, right? They're just starting to get an understanding for the world and what it's all about. So I've learned to be patient and to take a breath and let them go crazy, and we'll clean up later at
Yeah.
midnight before we do it all again the next
And
day.
and when they're 15 and 13, you're going to long for them to be 5 and 3.
100%. Yeah, that's a whole different type of patience.
Yeah.
That's a whole different type of a reality. I don't want to think about that yet. But yes, you're 100% right. And people tell me that all the time. So
Yeah. Well,
right now, yeah,
one of the things my brother told me when he first became a dad was says, just when you figure out how to be a good parent, you know, for a 2-year-old, you're now a
they're
parent
5.
to a
Yeah.
3-year-old.
Yeah.
When you figure out how to be a parent to a 3-year-old, now they're a 4-year-old, and
Yeah.
it's just this constant evolution of,
Yeah. And I have two. So like the first one, you're like, oh, you have to do this, and you're like so like you're trying to be so protective of everything. And then the second one, you're like, she'll be okay. It's just like a totally different like frame of reference. Because like when you haven't done it before, you don't, like you said, you don't have experience, right? You don't. It's like life. Like you're scared, you're nervous, you're very cautious. But when you've gone through it once, the second time around, it's not so bad, right? It's you know how to when their face starts blowing up because they got stung by a bee, give them Benadryl, and it's fine. You're not rushing them to the hospital. So like it's just like a whole different approach, and I think that's could be said for work or relationships or anything. It might seem scary at first, but you got to show up, right? You got to show up, and once you do it once, it's okay. It's not that bad. You'll be
yeah,
okay. You'll be
yeah,
okay.
love it.
Yeah.
Freddie, we could go on and on, but is there anything
Oh yeah.
that we missed that you think would be important for the listeners that we want to throw out there before we start to wrap things up?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, in kind of summary of what we talked about, I think relationships are so important. The way that you approach your day is so important. To be positive, have an open mind, have an open heart. Love, love. Like it's one of the best things that you could do. And I think like people can chase money and people can chase power and people can chase all sorts of things on this earth, but the richness of people is in how they love. And I think that's something that again comes from my family. And I said, I love you, Dan, or when we see each other, or if I love you, I want you to know that I love you. So if we could all go throughout the day and just spread a little bit more love around, I think though the whole world would be in a much better place. So I think
Yeah, no doubt about that. So, Fred, that brings us to our final question. As you know, the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of the Michael Franti song Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. So it's one of the little things that Freddie does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place.
the little thing that I do every day, Dan, I think it's spreading laughter. It's bringing joy out to the world. Talking about what we just talked about, spreading love, not only to my family, to my wife, to my kids, to the community, to everybody. I want everybody that comes into contact with me to leave that conversation smiling and being on a different path than they were when they met me, whether they were upset or sad or whatever they had to that point. Hopefully when they cross paths with me, they're on a little bit of a different journey, um and um and that's something that I really pride myself on. So
Yeah, that's a great
spreading the
answer.
love, Dan, spreading the love.
That's a great answer, and it's so important. We've talked about it over and over throughout the show, and it is so important to just be kind, show love, smile to people, be happy, make them laugh,
Have a
all those little
conversation, guys.
things.
Have a conversation. Get out, talk to people, talk to your neighbor. You might not agree with things. Talk to your neighbor. Talk to the person that don't talk to the person that's comfortable with. Talk to the people that you feel like would be uncomfortable with, because those are the people that need it the most. So, just be a kind person and be a kind human, and I think that we'll all be in a better place.
Yep. If you're a Red Sox fan, get a couple Yankees fans, and vice versa.
Look at us, Dan. Look at us. Right? Perfect bow to the conversations. the Yankees and the Red Sox.
I love it.
That's
So
cool.
for everybody out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com. While you're there, pick up a copy of one of my books. Freddie, I love this conversation. I can't wait till we get back through Jersey and we can get together and
Yep.
see how much. I mean, I can't even imagine how big the girls are going to be next
great.
time we see you.
They're
But
growing like weeds, Dan. They're growing like weeds.
can't wait to get together and give you guys a hug and sit down and catch up again. So thanks for taking the time, and really appreciate this conversation.
It was great. Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate it, and I'll be talking with you soon. Thank you so much.
All right, you bet.